Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Natalie Himmelrich. Today I speak with Kellie Sipos, who I've met as part of being a guest on her podcast, My Child Left Home for Heaven. Kellie has experienced multiple losses within her own family, which started with her father's suicide, followed by the sudden unexpected loss of her sister. In 2018, she lost her daughter Emilie through an accidental drug overdose, after which Kellie candidly shares how she herself abused drugs to manage her own grief. Just a few months ago, her mother, who she cared for the last few months of her life, died too. Kellie says, "Emilie's grief was so on top of my heart every single day until I lost my mom. Now it's like the grief of my mom is shadowing over the top of the grief of Emilie, and I feel really guilty. I feel like I'm not grieving her appropriately. And then I realized, no, I'm just healing. I'm starting to move on from some of that. And yes, the grief of my mom is newer, but that in time it will be the same way. I think maybe having to go through it again somehow helped me to get over that big hurdle of Emilie." Please enjoy today's podcast. So welcome, Kellie, to our podcast. It is so nice to have you as a guest, having been a guest on your podcast for quite some time. How are you doing today, Kellie?
Good days and bad days. It's early here for me. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning, so far good. Yesterday was bad, so I just take it a day at a time right now.
Yes, and Kellie, just for our listeners, you had quite a recent loss, and in the light of that, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story of the multiple losses that you had in your life and the trauma or the traumatic aspects of those?
Well, let me, I guess, start with my most recent loss, and that was the loss of my mother. And I know many people out there listening may be, comparing the loss of a child to the loss of your mother, not thinking it is as big as your child. And it's not, but it really caught me off guard because it hit me in a completely different way. Now, granted, my mom and I were extremely close. She lived 1 mile down the beach from me for the last 12 years. She has helped me with raising my kids, actually even homeschooled them some days, helped me with the multiple orthopedic surgeries I had to have. She was not just my mom, she was my best friend. Her and I were so much alike. So it was different. It's not just the loss of my mother, it's the loss of my best friend. And I was her caretaker for the last year. Actually, tomorrow will be a year ago that she had her stroke. And then, being with her and steadily watching her decline up until I went to Atlanta for a conference for a week, came back. And when I came back, I could just tell something was different. And literally 2 weeks after that date, she had passed. So it's just different. It's, I like to say, rip a lot of Band-Aids off of the grief with Emilie. And I'll bring this, another thing I realized that I actually talked to my daughter about last night a little bit later with the differences of the two griefs. But anyway, it was just different. Since she was ill and, we had the 2 weeks, I spent the last 5 days with her around the clock, my sister and I tag teaming. And we were there. My head was laying next to her head on the pillow. My sister was holding her hand. I was whispering in her ear and praying as she passed. And everything that I had really prayed for that I wanted to be there, with her. And I realized later too, that that's a huge honor when a family member or loved one will let you be with them when they leave, that not all family members will do that. So my mom gave so much in her life. See, I keep thinking I still get emotional when I talk about it. It's only been a couple months, so it's still raw. She gave so much to so many and to me through her life that it was a beautiful thing that I could give back to her.
And, I want the listeners to know as well that this is, as you have been listening for some time, this is very authentic here. We're talking about real life stuff. And if there are tears, if we are moved, and if you're moved by listening, it's all welcome. So take a breath.
And I can then backtrack, I guess, and, talk a little bit about my daughter, Emilie. And I raised 4 girls in Pinellas County, Florida on the beaches and thought this was a beautiful place to raise children, that they could be outside all the time and playing, and homeschooled them, and they grew up in church and, was doing everything I thought was right. And, just my daughter hit the teen years, and the drugs came in actually with two of my daughters. But my oldest daughter, Emilie, it really hit hard with her. And she actually overdosed in January of 2018 from trying heroin the first time, and lived through it. And, she would even joke about it, saying, that God didn't want me yet, and all these things. And she got her life back on track after that. She was really trying very, very hard to get custody of her daughter back, and, to get her life back on track when, unfortunately, it was a combination of methadone that she was taking for the opioid addiction, and prescriptions that a neurologist gave her for her neuropathy from her overdose that she had in January. And the combination of the two apparently was lethal. So she took the medication, went to sleep, and never woke up again. So that was, that was a trauma there. Like my mom, I wasn't there with her when she passed. Her boyfriend was with her, and he called me, but I was there and got a chance to sit with her for about 45 minutes before the medical examiner, came to get her. So that was, and I've told you before, when you and I have talked before, I wouldn't give that up for $1 million. It was my time. I brought her into this world, and I liked that I got that chance to be with her, but it left me, with a little bit of PTSD. I have a hard time feeling anything hard, anything cold, that just triggers remembering holding her and touching her, afterwards. So we went from that trauma, and your listeners aren't used to, I'm going to apologize if you can hear my dogs in the background. I try to tape their mouths shut, and they still won't be quiet whenever I'm doing this. It never fails, so I apologize. It was about 6 months after we lost my daughter that her daughter, which I had raised, the baby daddy had decided it was too hard for her to be around our family and watching us grieve. And he took her from us and packed up and moved to the other coast of Florida. And I haven't seen her for over 3 years now. So that was a hard one to kind of swallow on top of it. And then going really from that into, my nonprofit that I'd done for 18 years, the lease that we had on the property was, the owner was selling the property, and we really just didn't have the money to spend $1.7 million to save this little ministry nonprofit that I did. So we had decided to go ahead and let it go and shut down. So that was very emotional, and yet good point on that one. It got rescued, and someone actually came forward with the money and purchased the property, and I'm back up and running as of January, and actually 5 times the amount of therapy, equine or special needs children that I'm working with now. So at least one happy point in the midst of all that. Going back, my third daughter, I had said, was doing drugs, at the same time that her sister was. And she was actually in jail the night that her sister passed away. So God was good and had her just happen to call my husband so that he could tell her, because I had the sheriff that was with me at the scene where my daughter was trying to reach the county jail to get a hold of my daughter, Maddie, and pull her out and let her know what was going on. And originally the judge had said no, that she couldn't leave and come to the memorial service or funeral. And then he changed his mind. So that was great. So she got to be with us. But she was sentenced to 22 months in the state penitentiary at the age of 18. And every story you hear about prison and everything you watch on all these shows that are out there, that's it. I was actually banned from the prison for the last 6 months that she was in, because she was trying to get messages to me as to what was actually going on in there. A girl had actually died, several were being sexually abused, and she was trying to stand up for everybody. And so their way of ending that was limited phone calls. I was allowed to talk to her for, I think, 10 minutes once a week, and no visitation for the last 6 months.
Wow.
So that was I kept feeling like, wow, we just keep getting slammed here over and over and over again. So, and then, at least I had I think a year that was kind of good. And on a good note, let me say about my daughter, Maddie, there's always a bright side to everything. And we can discuss that too. She has been out for 2 years now and completely clean and sober, no issues whatsoever. She is still dating the same boy that she was dating when she went in. He stood by her side, and he has a little boy. They are engaged and getting married November 5th. And she just did her engagement pictures 2 weekends ago. So has a wonderful job and is doing fantastic. I could not be any more proud of her than I am.
And still, hearing that all in the last 10 minutes is like a full load of a mixed bag of different losses. Losses through death, but also losses through failed experiences or other things. And also a combination of traumatic situations where you described holding your daughter and the post-traumatic stress, but also having your other daughter in jail and all the issues with that. So a lot of things in a very short time. How do you deal with that? Kellie, I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I did it the good way and the bad way. Unfortunately, the bad way was I had been through a lot of stress dealing with my daughters and multiple times in jail and, I could go on for hours with the stories of what they put me through while they were in active addiction. So I was under a lot of stress then. And my doctor, put me on a low dose of Xanax to kind of help with it. And after my daughter passed away, and this is hard to say considering my daughter died of a drug overdose, but I started abusing Xanax and hit the point where I was taking it, just to sleep, because all I wanted to do was really, if you took a couple Xanax, it would knock you out for 2-3 hours so you could sleep. And that was kind of the way I dealt with it right in the beginning. And I wouldn't say really it was not directly in the beginning, because for those first 6 months when my granddaughter was still around, life was good to me. I had her. I had a little piece of Emilie with me. What really set me off with that the most, I would say, was when Marley was taken from me. And us starting the court battle to hopefully get visitation to be able to see her. And I talk about in the beginning of grief, and I think everyone goes through this, where you don't want to go anywhere, you just want to lay in bed all day, you just want to watch TV, or you just kind of withdraw completely, and I did that, I would say, about a month after she passed, but for short periods of time, because I still had my granddaughter. So I still had this little 6-year-old to take care of, and I did go back to work, but I was only teaching a therapy on Saturdays. It's very hard to dump yourself out and give a bunch of yourself to people when you're not there 100% yourself.
Yeah.
So, but then I did realize that I had an issue with it and decided to go off, and didn't realize it's a very brutal detox to go off of. And finally one morning just gave in, and my husband had no idea what was going on, and shared with him that I got myself in a bind here, and I really need some professional help. So we checked me into a rehab, and I went to a rehab for 2 weeks to help them kind of medically detox me and keep an eye to make sure that, because you can have seizures when you're detoxing from Xanax and that. So got some great therapy in there and a chance to, share and talk with people. And I guess for the first time then heard, like you just said, I've been through a lot. To me, my life has seemed, I go back to my father committing suicide 18 years ago, and then my sister dying 6 months after that. I think for me, life has always just been, it seems like, one thing after another. And I just figured that's the way everybody's lives are. I didn't realize that, I was dealing with some pretty major issues that I needed help with and to sort out. So I got, back from there and got myself involved in, what I'm doing big today besides the teaching, the therapy is the drug epidemic awareness movement and Moms Against Drugs in the state of Florida. I head that up. I go into the public schools and speak, telling my daughter's story, even showing a picture of her laying in her casket to, try to shake up these kids that, the saying one pill can kill today is with fentanyl is there. It's more of a crisis today than it was 4 years ago when my daughter passed away. So trying to use that, and then started the podcast, started my own podcast, and I still laugh about it. I still can't believe that 8,000 people listen to me when, I just feel like I'm rambling. But apparently us moms like to listen to other moms and know that we're okay. What we're dealing with is okay and normal.
Yeah, and I like Megan Devine's book title in that respect, saying, you don't have to be okay. It's okay, even if you're not okay. And, interestingly, just listening to you now, and even though we've known each other for a while, just like in a side sentence, you mentioned the suicide of your father and then the loss of your sister, which happened before. but obviously also are part of your story with grief, with loss, and with trauma, because both of those losses, as I heard you say, suicide is always traumatic and unexpected, or in most cases, let's say. Mm-hmm. And the death of your sister was also untimely, I'm supposing.
Yeah, she was only 45, and it was a aneurysm. So no warning whatsoever on that one. And she was my best friend. We were very close. So that one, that was hard. And dealing, I know that, you've dealt with the suicide also, and you deal with so much anger with the person afterwards. And that actually, going through the grief with that, I remember going back. My mom she's a very stoic German woman, or was, and at the calling hours for my dad, people would show up, and I can remember, we had this long line, of all the kids and the grandkids, and then my mom standing up there, and people would come in. And my dad was mayor of the town I grew up in, and very involved in politics and that. So, a lot of people, hundreds of people showed up, and they just took it for granted because my dad had been kind of ill for a while. That, was Skip's cancer back? Was he sick? And my mom would just blurt out at the top of the line, no, Skip committed suicide. And then pass them down the line to us girls, where these people their mouths are gaping open and having, what do you say when somebody, answers it like that? It's the same question like when somebody says, oh, how old's your oldest child? And you just kind of stop and freeze for a second as to what to say. So I don't want to say resented my dad. I was very angry with my dad. And that actually suppressing my grief then, because my mom just, you never saw her cry through it. Even when my nephew was the one that actually presented my mom the American flag, my dad was military, at the funeral. And that was the first time I saw my mom break down through that whole experience. So, us kids didn't dare break down. We were trying to be strong for mom. So I suppressed everything. And my youngest Molly was only, I think, 3 at the time. And I came back here and ended up with, my body just collapsed. My body could only take, it was about 6 months after, it could only take so much. And they kept me in the hospital for a week. And it was just, I was functioning on 1 and 2 hours sleep a night, or just grabbing it when I could. I wasn't eating. So that was my first taste of real traumatic grief. And it really surprised me the way my body reacted to it. So, and it happened again this time with my mom. My body is really having a hard time. I don't remember with Emilie, how I physically responded. And I guess I kind of drowned it between taking care of my grandchild and then taking the Xanax, that maybe I didn't feel it as much, where like I literally could say right now, this is raw grief, and it was with my dad too. I'm not drinking. I'm trying to do nothing whatsoever so that I can work through the steps.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the physical symptoms, because actually my client this week, she just said that me explaining to her about the physical symptoms or the physical reaction and responses that it can show after grief, she wasn't aware that this is part of grief. And to make a distinction between, is it a physical issue or is it grief showing up in its energy working through the body? It's always important to go and seek out doctor's advice on that, not to just assume it's grief or the other way around, but for people to actually know that it can be very physical. So there is physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental ways that grief can show its energy. So that just as on a side note, but you actually just really beautifully described how your body was reacting to it. So what helped you? You said that you were suppressing your grief then, and at another time you were using Xanax to, how would you say, maybe to
lessen it. Xanax to me is martinis in a bottle in a pill form without the hangover. That's the only, you just feel good when you're on them. It's like nothing really bothers you.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that at some point you made a decision and told your husband. What made that shift? Like, how did you come out of this phase? If someone were to listen to and they might be self-medicating, or they might be doing something else to numb the pain, what made the shift for you, or how did you make the shift?
That's a tough one, because I don't think I've shared this publicly before. So, but I will be honest with this, because this will show how desperate that someone that's addicted. And I mean, remember here, I'm a 59-year-old woman whose faith is strong, goes to church. I'm not I don't look like a drug addict. People think drug addict and they think some person with the little scabs all over them from methadone, or skinny little person. And, you would be surprised walking through a crowd that probably 20% of that crowd has addictive tendencies, whether it's alcohol, drugs, food, sex, whatever. The final point for me is I'd gone to the doctor 2 times explaining that I was out of my prescription and that I needed more. And in my opinion, he should just give me more and I actually used my daughter as an excuse. Well, I'm trying to deal with the loss of Emilie and Marley. And, so the doctors were they went ahead and they gave it to me sometimes. One of my doctors now in hindsight said that she was beginning to see that I had a problem. And I asked her, why didn't you, confront me with it? And she said she was afraid to. And I said, well, will you do me a favor? Next time you think somebody has an issue, confront them with it, because you could have probably saved me about 5 months of grief of dealing with this on my own. But it hit the point where this is hard to give up. I actually did buy some Xanax off the street, off of one of my daughter's friends that that I knew it was prescription form. There was nothing in it. She would get a prescription and she needed cash, so she would sell half her prescription. That ran out, and I was about day 3 into detoxing. And when you're coming off Xanax, you don't sleep. You have terrible abdominal pains, sweating, and you cannot sleep at all. And I mean, visions and you're not sleeping, but they're like dreams or hallucinations. I don't know how to describe it. You just see very funky things. I picked up my daughter Emilie's phone, who had passed away, and opened it up and started scrolling through it to see if I could find the phone number of one of her drug dealers so that I could get Xanax. And her picture sits on my dresser. And I remember doing that and looking over at her picture and just knowing the disappointment that would be in her that I was doing that. And I just finally was like, dear God, you have to help me. I'm no different than my daughters right now. And so I turned to my husband. He was still sleeping. This was all happening in the morning, and he was still sleeping. And that's when I called him in the room. And he says he didn't know what was going on. Like I said, my youngest daughter knew, and she said she told my husband a few times, and he kept saying, no, Mom's okay. She's got it. Don't worry. She's got it handled. He was great. He took me to the hospital, and I got myself checked into a rehab from there. Very humbling, humility. I can't think of the word. Just very embarrassing situation. I mean, and then to get I was put in for 3 days with, people who were really strung out addicts. So, trust me, we'll never do that again. And I'm not saying I still crave Xanax. Trust me. I have said 3 times going through this with my mom, I would give anything to have a Xanax right now. I'm like, just that small little dose to take the edge off. I mean, it is something that will be there for the rest of my life. It's like an alcoholic can't drink, well, that drug just can't touch it.
Wow, thank you for being so honest and so forthright, because I'm sure that some of the people listening know what you're talking about and might even see some light from your story.
I hope so.
What would you wish you would have known at the beginning of your grieving and healing journey? And you can take the beginning wherever it is. It maybe even before your dad passed away. What would you wish you would have known? Or
it would be, I would say, to start with Emilie. I mean, my dad's, that goes back so far. Well, no, I guess it's maybe the 2 in 1 together. All of them. Let me say all of them. It's okay to not be okay. I've given myself grace, and I've learned if I want to cry, I cry. And I actually went Saturday. I was out at my farm. It was in between classes at lunchtime, and I went in my truck. It was 92 degrees, and I was so hot, and turned the air conditioning on while I was eating my lunch in there, and it just hit me, and I just started crying. I mean, not tears, like sobbing, crying about my mom. And one of the kids walked up to my car, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And at first I wanted to be like, "Oh, yeah, it was just a song." And I was like, "No, I'm not." I said, "I will be okay." I said, I'm really sad about my mom. And the kid, keep in mind, I'm working with children with mental disabilities. And she was like, "Well, that's okay. You'll see your mommy again. I'll give you a hug." And that, it touched me. But I'm glad I didn't cover it up with her. It's okay to not do everything that everybody dumps on you, and to say, I got grief brain right now. I can't mentally keep things going the way I could before. So I wish I wouldn't have put what my mom did. Sorry, Mom. We all like to criticize our moms sometimes after, in hindsight. But, I wish she would have allowed us to grieve properly when my dad passed away, because I think I thought then that you had to hold it in. So when I lost Emilie and that grief was just uncontrollable, and just, I just was so afraid to let anybody know that I wasn't okay, that I wasn't dealing with it.
And probably she learned it from somewhere else, that grief should be held inside. And by your story that you just shared, you are sending a different signal. And I think that's the important thing for people to hear as well. You can change. And I was just recording another podcast with one of the people that is very vocal. And her mantra is, I'm unapologetic about my grief. And it just stayed with me over the last few days, because all of this, I believe, is sending a new signal, a new symbolism around grief, and how we can actually deal with it is by staying open, by staying honest, by being authentic. And as you just said, by I'm not okay now, and I hopefully will be. And that allows people to come forward and to see it and to be supportive and to get a different message.
Well, that's why I went to a counselor twice after Emilie passed away. And I shared that you and I talked about this before. Unfortunately, she was young. I felt like I was telling her more about grief and drug addiction than what she should have known. I felt like I was counseling her more than she was helping me. But the last few weeks, we just got back from, we're doing actually 3 services for my mom. And my mom drove a Mustang convertible, and her name was Sally. So we're calling it Mustang Sally's Farewell Tour. And I have this whole logo with this Mustang with her little hands going up in it. And we played a video to her. We put a video together of her to the song Mamma Mia. Everything has been very, very upbeat for this. But we did the service here in Florida first. And then a couple weeks ago, we went up to Ohio to do the service. And June 29th would have been my parents' 65th wedding anniversary. And we're taking both my dad and mom's ashes and releasing them on off the Biloxi schooner in Mississippi, which is what they wanted. But it timed out so perfect that it's their 65th wedding anniversary that we get to do it on. Going through this, my sister is even a lot like my mom. And I don't know, maybe she's different in private. I love my sister. She drinks too much. And I about killed her when I was up for the services in Ohio because her husband couldn't come. He was ill, and from Mississippi up there. And she drank too much. That was the only time she seemed to get mushy or anything about my mom was then. So then I just felt like, okay, if she's not being emotional, I can't be emotional. So I kind of suppressed it quite a bit while I was up there and came back. And now I'm going through, which we go through with our children, loss also, is all the guilt, the what I could have done, what I should have done, what I should have said. I should have, the list. It goes on and on and on and on. Your brain just kind of, and I'm going through that a lot with my mom right now. The Sunday before she passed, we knew she was in failure. Her skin was even breaking down on her back and on her legs. It was starting to decompose already. The circulation had gotten so bad. She was adamant about not being put on pain medication. I could see her in so much pain. And I, talked to hospice then, and we removed all of her medications, her IV line, because she was dehydrated from not eating and drinking, and started her on a low dose of morphine. And I had them tell them it was extra strength Tylenol. I'm telling you what, that is haunting me something terrible. My mind keeps going, well, if I wouldn't have done that, would she have lived 2 weeks longer? If I wouldn't have done that, would she have not been so, incoherent the last couple days? My second daughter, Olivia, is really good for me to talk to. And she was just feeling like, Mom, you're playing in your head too much, and you're going to drive yourself insane. And she goes, I really think you need to talk to somebody. So I actually have a session at 4:00 on Friday, and I'm going to be faithful about going in once a week and sorting through some of this. I think, again, I help so many people, and I'm just empty right now. I'm a glass that is completely bone dry. There's sand in the bottom, and I need to get myself filled back up, to be able to help everybody else out there.
I bow my head to you because I just listened to David Kessler's new podcast the other day when he was talking about losing his son, which was in 2018. And he took himself again back to a counselor. And then he went to a grief group. He described that I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go to the grief group. I know how good it is, but my books were laying on the table just across the room. And it's good for people to hear that even us who are working with grieving people or who are doing podcasts for grieving people, we are human too. We grieve too. That's normal. That is to be expected given the circumstances. The thing is, even if you don't expect it, and I'm speaking about myself in November when my cat died, I did not expect to be grieving so much. Mm-hmm. And, some people would say, well, it's just a cat. Well, honestly, I thought that too. But it was my cat. And whatever happened in that moment when I held her when she was put to sleep, it just overtook me. And my daughter and I could be honest and authentic and give her an experience of this is grief. And my daughter knew when it was enough for her, when she couldn't take more. And she stepped outside, also to know when it's reaching capacity. So I really bow my head to you to speak about
there's a term
knowing when to need help.
There's a term, and you probably know what it is, in this clinic or this conference I was in Atlanta a few months ago for the equine mental health. And that's what the majority of the people in the class were counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists. So I felt like I was under a microscope with all of them all the time. But it was good for me to hear that. I forget what they called it. Was it like an empathy burnout or empathy something? And I didn't realize that that's what I deal with from time to time. And especially now doing, 47 clients on my own at Saddle Up. And I mean, a lot of these kids are very, have been through a lot of trauma in their life. So I didn't realize that really does drain on you a lot. And when something happens, when you're that drained, I was so drained when my mom passed away that I think that's the other reason it just kind of hit me hard.
Could it be compassion fatigue?
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I knew there was a name for it. And I did a lot of, I've talked about it quite a bit since I've been, back from that conference. And I've realized over the 18 years that I've been doing the equine therapy, I see periods where that's what's happened to me, when I just kind of shut down and I just want everyone and everything to leave me alone. But I've never known how to properly deal with it. So that's why I feel like, even from now on, probably at least having a counseling session at least once a month for me, just to get everything out I'm hearing about, sexual trauma from children when I'm doing the equine mental health with them. You take it home. I don't know how you guys all do it. I take it home with me, and I shouldn't, but I do. It stays in my head.
I could say more about that, but that would extend our podcast. To finish this off, before we go into rapid fire question, how would you say your loss and trauma has shaped you? What has your journey taught you?
That I'm not as strong as I think I am, but yet I am stronger than I think I am. I would say that if someone would have told me 5 years ago what I was in for these 5 years, I would have said, there's no way, couldn't do it. But you do. And through each, grief or trauma or whatever, it makes you stronger.
And I guess there is an ember inside of each and every one of us that burns, even though it might be small at times. And I recall situations and times in my grief and trauma journey where I didn't believe I had any resilience left in me. Mm-hmm. Even then, looking back now, I see how much I was doing. I was actually writing my first book at that time. It seems strange, but there is much more strength than we believe there is. Kellie, you do a lot for grieving people, and we're going to put all the links to your podcast in the show notes, so you can go and grab those links there. Go and listen to some of the podcasts that Kellie do with different people. Is there any other thing, any other resource or insight that you would want to leave listeners with before we go into the last few questions?
Well, just through my website or through Facebook, My Child Left Home for Heaven, I have a global memorial Facebook page. There is no talking on it. There's nothing, but you can write a sentence about your child, their birth date, their heaven date, and a picture of them. And that's so that our angels are out there for eternity, in cyberspace. So, if you even if you don't listen to the podcast, if you just go Facebook, My Child Left Home for Heaven, it will pop up. Your book on the, because you and I talked about that in the grieving parents. My husband and I are kind of going through some things with that right now, with not just the loss of Emilie, but him accepting the way that I am with the grief of my mother. And that book, I said on the podcast that you and I did together on my site, I call it the Bible in grieving parents. I mean, your book, Grieving Parents, is just phenomenal. Another book that really, really helped me a lot was Shattered. And I was trying to find the book before we got on here this morning to remember his name, and I can't remember his name. I can't find the book. but it's a Gary Rowe. That's it. Just thought of it. Shattered by Gary Rowe. Phenomenal book. It helped me a lot. Christian contemporary music. I walk around with music constantly playing and singing, and that keeps me lifted up a lot. And my faith. If I didn't have my faith, I don't know what I would do. I mean, just even to watch my mom in those final moments. And I guess sometimes I expected this like, spiritual moment. You know, the skies opened up as my mom took her last breath and left. I'd never been with someone, you know, when they took their last breath. And that wasn't there. But her little hand had been so clenched up to her chest from the stroke. And with therapy, she got it down, but then it got tight again in the last couple of weeks with everything with her body shutting down. And my sister and I commented within 30 seconds after she passed, everything on her relaxed. And there was just such a peaceful look. It was just tough. The last month was really tough. And to see that peace, it just, I think, gave me that hope back again that there's more to this. There's so much more to this world than now, and I will be with my mom again someday. And she's with Emilie right now, and she's with my dad, and she's with everybody that I've lost, that I've loved. And someday I will join them. To them, it's a blink. To us, yes, it seems like eternity. My faith has probably gotten me through this the most. Just my faith in knowing where I'm going and knowing that I will see my mom again. And again, knowing it's okay to not be okay.
Well, thank you so much, Kellie, for all the beautiful resources that you shared. And even that last book that you mentioned, Shattered, we're going to put in the show notes for people to actually be able to find it as well. We're going to finish up with the rapid fire questions. Those 5 questions or actually sentence starters that I'm going to ask each and every one of my podcast guests. Would it be okay? Are we ready?
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea. I want to steal this idea from you. Okay?
Go ahead, steal it. I think I got it from Brené Brown's podcast or somewhere.
You're so much more organized and detailed with your podcast than I am. I'm gonna have to touch it up a notch here.
So this is just a sentence starter, and you just end it. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. Just whatever comes to mind spontaneously. Ready? Mm-hmm. So the first one: grieving and trauma means.
I want to say heartache. I'll come back later and I'll think of something else on that one tonight. I'll call you at 4:00 in the morning, my time. Okay, or your time.
The second one, healing means?
Surviving.
What I have learned about myself in the light of loss and trauma?
Like I said before, that I'm stronger than I gave myself credit for, I think.
And one thing I wish people knew about loss and trauma is?
It gets better. With each day, it gets better. I know you said just quick answers, but I didn't get to go on this. Can I backtrack a second?
Sure.
This was something I was just talking to Olivia about last night, and it goes in that guilt category. I actually feel like Emilie's grief was so on the top of my heart every single day until I lost my mom. And now it's like the grief of my mom is shadowing over top of the grief of Emilie. And I feel really guilty. I feel like I'm not grieving her appropriately. And then I realized, no, I'm just healing. I'm starting to move on from some of that. And yes, the grief with my mom is more newer, but that in time will be the same way. And I think maybe having to go through it again somehow helped me get over that big hurdle of Emilie.
And the last but not least one is one specific thing that has changed since my loss and trauma that I wouldn't want to miss.
I say I love you when I hang up the phone to everyone in my family all the time. And I try to tell everybody around me how much they mean to me constantly. Mm-hmm. And not take any day for granted, because you don't know what the next day, tomorrow could be another trauma.
Beautiful, but I think this kind of appreciation for what is right now. I mean, this has been shared by many of the people that I've interviewed. That seems to be one of the common elements. So thank you so much, Kellie, for the time that we spent together.
You,
and it was an honor to listen to you and for you to share your whole story. I mean, even though we've known each other for a while, it's been just such an honor for me to be able to be present for you in that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you too. And I have a feeling we are friends for eternity here.
Thank you, Kellie.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nataliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep reading. I promise it will get easier.